Okay, so now we know about the different render engines. Let's go ahead and start lighting our scene in Maya and exploring the different options we have for lighting. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave these models we've imported in, and I'm going to go ahead and create a ground plane just so we can have a surface for us to use as a floor. Right? So you've already learned that if I click this clapboard right here, this is going to render our current frame with whatever render engine is specified in our render settings. So if I go to my render settings, you'll see I'm currently set to the Arnold renderer. And so if I click the clapboard, it would render a frame with the Arnold renderer. If I change this to Redshift and click the frame, it would render it with the Redshift renderer. And then there's Arnold software and hardware 2.0. So it's lots of different options there. But I'm not going to use that button. Instead, I want an interactive render. As I alter stuff, I want to see how the render changes. And this render button will allow us to do that. So I'm going to go to Arnold and open up the Arnold render view. So the Arnold render view will let us do that. If I hit the play button, it will start to render. And you'll see right off, we're not actually seeing anything. And that's because there's no lights in the scene. Like it's rendering this image, it's rendering it all as dark, right? You can tell that by clicking this button here, and this will show us our alpha channel. This will show us the parts that have objects visible. It's like a transparency layer. And you can see that there are things there. They're just not rendering with any color or lighting. So I'll go ahead and hit stop on my video there. And I'm also going to kind of dock this in my UI. There we go. So if I dock this in my UI, I'll be able to sort of have this here, and I can zoom in and out and see what I need on it. Right. So I could create a light. So I could see something in this render, and I could go to Arnold and create an area light, scale that up, rotate it, maybe move it up, and hit the play button. We still won't see anything, but if I go to my attribute editor and uncheck normalize, we'll start to see stuff. And this is how we would light a scene if we want to have very fine control of every light that is projecting into this scene, right? Let's say you're walking down a hallway and there are multiple lights in the ceiling, and you want to have all of those lights each casting a different light, and maybe there's a window where there's some blue light coming in. This will allow us to very specifically build a detailed lighting scenario. There are some other lighting options that are going to be very useful for us to get a sort of a jump start on this. And so it's not an end-all, be-all solution, but we're going to be talking about image-based lighting in this. So I'm going to delete that light we have there. Again, there's no lights in the room. And what I'm going to do is create, under Arnold, I'm going to create a sky dome light. And what you're going to see is that creates a dome around our environment here, around our objects, right? And what this is just a sphere, but that entire sphere is a light. And it's casting light inward toward our object. And so if I hit play, you'll see it's like we're getting a white light that surrounds everything. Right? And again, this is why I'm using the Arnold render view, is by hitting play, I can now navigate around here and it will update, and I can see what it's looking like from this side, and it'll slowly start to render. It will slow down your computer a little bit, but this allows us to get interactive feedback from our render. So that's what the sky dome light does. However, as nice as it is to be able to see everything, this is really boring, really bland lighting. If you are in a white room where the walls are glowing, that is the only place where this lighting will be realistic. So why even have this? Like, it's a nice way to get an overview of everything. But what this is actually used for is to generate lighting using an image. Okay, so if we go to polyhaven.com, there's some really nice things in here that we can utilize for this. So the first thing I want to point out is these HDRIs. Okay, so HDRI is high dynamic range image. So if I browse these, what you'll see is they are 360-degree images. These are images, it's actually usually multiple images that are taken and sort of stitched together, panoramas of a 360-degree view, including the ground and the sky. Right? And these are unwrapped in a way that they will wrap around that sky dome image. So if we were to pick one of these, let's pick a couple of these. Let's try Victoria Sunset. So I click on this, and I'm going to download this. I'm going to go ahead and leave mine at 4K and EXR. Download that. And I'm going to download that onto my project window, which I believe is on PC, Data, Project 2. I'll go and put that in source images, and I'll create a new folder in here called HDRI. And I'll hit save. So I've got Victoria Sunset as one. And I'll go find something else that's maybe a little different. Let's try what about this nighttime? Cobblestone Street Night. So this is a completely different lighting setup, a different view. Right? You'll see from these images too, this is an example of the type of lighting you would get from this on different materials. So I'll download this, and these are pretty big files. This is almost 100 megabytes. So now we have these two files in here, and I can go in, and in our color, I can click this color checkerboard here. And anytime there's a checkerboard at the end of this, this is giving me the option to map something into this. So instead of my color just being solid white, let me go ahead and close this and show you. I could change this to solid red. And what that's going to give us is a red wall that's casting inward. It's very creepy, right? Or a green wall. So what this checkerboard is giving us the option to do is to have more than just a solid color, right? We could have a checkerboard mapping in, or we could have a grid, or we could have a noise pattern, or a leather pattern, or something like that. But in most cases, what we're usually wanting to map in is some sort of image to drive that. And so that's where we're going to look for a file. And so I get a file. It brings in another node here. I can click my options box and go to my HDRI. And let's just start with the Victoria Sunset. I hit open. And that will import in. Let me go ahead and stop my render there and hit play again. And now what you see is that we're getting lighting from that image. Now it looks terrible on my viewport. I don't know why it looks that bad, but it does. But what you'll see is the lighting from this environment, or from this image that's wrapping around my environment, is actually casting light in my scene, right? The sunset is happening over there, and it's casting lighting from where the sun is in this image, right? And you actually see the shadow casting. So what we're getting is sort of a replication of lighting that existed in this environment when these pictures were taken. So you'll see the same way that this little plant is casting some shadows on the ground, it's the same direction of the shadows. The same lighting color, this orange that's coming from the sun, that is the orange that is illuminating our scene. And even some of the bounce light from the blue of the sky is getting us these bluer shadows in the top, right? And so with image-based lighting, what we're doing is we're getting all of this free lighting information that came from this environment. And it gives us a really great first start with this lighting setup. Again, it's not the final solution for this. There's still a lot of little tweaks we can do. Now, if I go back to if I click this button right here, it'll take me back to my light. Or I can always just click my light out here and select it. Now I still have the ability to control some of this stuff, right? I can still tell it to not cast shadows or something like that. I want it to cast shadows, but the other thing I can do is I can turn up, if it's not quite bright enough or it's too bright, I can adjust the exposure to turn that up. And then the other thing I can do is I can rotate it. So I can rotate my image-based lighting if I want my sun, if I want my axe to cast a shadow on the barrel, right? The last thing I want to show you is that even though this image is back here, like that image is showing up in our render. Often that's not what we want because, unless I want this scene to be taking place in the middle of the road, this is not a great background, right? So I want the lighting sometimes, but I don't want the background. And what I can do is scroll down here to the bottom of my lighting setting, and where it says camera, I can just turn that from 1 to 0, and I'll still get the lighting from that scene without the image in the background. And there's other things I can turn on and off. If I decided I didn't want, the specular lighting coming off of that, I can turn that up and down as well. But don't worry about that too much. This is basically the camera lighting. I don't want the light being visible to the camera. That's what I'm turning down there. So this is a great start for our lighting setup. And I'll show you again that if I change my mind, I was like, that's not the lighting I want. What I would rather have is cobblestone streets at night. I can select that. It takes it a second to load it in. I guess I have to hit play on here to start my render back. And you'll see it's a completely different lighting setup based off of that image that was in our background, right? And I can always adjust that to get us the lighting that we need, right? So this is a really great way of getting us a start on our lighting. And it gives us a pretty photorealistic element to the lighting without a lot of work. And now we can go in, and if we need additional lighting, additional highlights on stuff, we can make those changes pretty easily. Or, again, I want this to be darker. Maybe I turn my exposure down. And I can then go in and add in additional lights as I need, right? So I can add an additional area light here. And I got my area light right here. Let's scale that up. Move this around a little bit. And then turn up my exposure. Check normalize. Turned up my exposure. And then I can add additional lighting as I need if I want a brighter light coming from this side. I can make this light even smaller and brighter if I wanted like some sort of specific, like a lamp or something over something. So this will give us a start, and then we can use our additional lights to finish up the scene and give us whatever changes we want. If I want this to look like a spotlight, I can change this from quad to like disc or something like that to give us more of that shape. So hopefully that helps. We will start on the same idea inside of Redshift in just a few minutes.